Welcome everyone to a quick review of formative assessment. In this video you can expect to get a definition, not just from me but from some of our in-house experts, and also some guidelines, specific examples, and then some reflection questions to get you thinking about formative assessment and how you use it in your classroom. To give you my quick simple definition of formative assessment, it's just considering student performance in order to identify what to do next. So you can do any method. This can be something as simple as a written quiz or just asking the students a fist to 5 on what they're understanding in the concepts or topics that you're presenting. And now let's listen to our in-house experts, Ms. Meredith White and Ms. Julian Hoagie, on their ideas or definitions of formative assessment.
Probably just like checking for like comprehension so that we can move forward, because you never want to teach a lesson, think the kids have it, and then move forward, and that next lesson builds off of that first lesson and they look like you have 5 different heads on top of you. So just to kind of check for progress as you go so that when you get to that next part B, they can build off of part A accurately.
Checking students' understanding, but not in a summative way. So checking if they understand like a vocab word, if they understand some sort of mini lesson that we just went over, checking to see what we need to go over again the next day or maybe next week even. So it's very small checkings of understanding as you go.
So after listening to those definitions, you probably think to yourself, oh yeah, I do formative assessment all the time, because you do. As teachers, we are always reflecting on our methods and how they're helping the students, and then asking the students for feedback so that we can change our instructional strategies. These are some guidelines that I got from the book Formative Assessment, Making It Happen in the Classroom by Margaret Heritage that might get you to think a little bit deeper about using formative assessments effectively. So you want to make sure that you are looking at formative assessments and using the data to guide your instruction. You also want to make sure that you're using formative assessments to give feedback to the students about their learning and how they can improve. And something that I think is easy for us to overlook, but is very important to the formative assessment process, is making sure that students are involved in this process, not only through self-evaluation, but also evaluation of their peers. Now let's listen to our experts again on some specific examples of formative assessment that they have used in their classroom.
So we're talking about it, they seem to get it. Well, then I actually give them a Bible and I give them Bible verses, and I give them like a chart, and I'm like, okay, like here's 10 verses, read them, see which one's based off of what the topic is. If they go under Mark, if they go under this Q source, or if they just are in Matthew or just are in Luke. And that was kind of like they looked at me with like what? And so then we went back and I was like, well, you guys understand like this, this, and this, and this, this, and this. And they're like, yeah. I'm like, all we are is we're putting it into action. So we didn't take, I didn't take it as a grade because you could tell like we still needed to kind of work through it. Originally I was thinking because they were doing so well in class with the discussion that they could do it by themselves. But because, again, with that first reaction, it was like, okay, well, let's go over it again. How about we work with partners? Because maybe between you and your partner, you can work through it. And then, of course, like I just kind of walked around, and a couple guys got stuck a couple times. But then once we went over it as a class, you could tell that they were like, oh, okay, so this story is in all 3 Gospels, which means it's probably from Mark. And this story is just in Matthew and Luke, so it's probably from that Q source. So they kind of slowly started to get that together. So then the next day I thought, well, let's try this again. So we did it again, and we did it individually, and they all rocked it. So kind of that way of like, because I thought like, oh, we'll rock it the first time. I'm like, oh, no, we're not.
Because they had the knowledge.
Right.
They doesn't have the process.
The application, yeah. So that was my fault in thinking like, oh, you know how to do it, but you don't know how to apply it. Mm-hmm. So just kind of that difference.
Different levels of bloom.
Right.
Excellent. Well, list here. What's on your list?
Of what I do?
Yes.
Okay, so walking around as they work, and I'll take little notes on sticky notes, like who's getting it, who's not, who's keeping up who's falling behind, because even that helps with who needs to redo things. There's a poster on my wall that says what stuck with you today. So when they leave for exit slips, I'll ask them like to define a term we went over, name one thing they learned today, stick it to the wall, I'll check them, ask them if we need to go over something again, and they'll tell me we'll go over it again. Admit slips, tell me something you learned yesterday. If they can't name anything, we'll go over it again. Even just asking like one term they'd like to clarify more. If you give some type of direct instruction, stopping and asking them for examples on their own. Any type of graphic organizer, so I know other teachers use like the KWLs. Those work. And then individual whiteboards I like, and answering in groups, so holding up your notebook, what do you guys come up with, talking about like how they got there versus someone else. And then you could always just do a really short quiz over what was covered.
Now that you've had the chance to listen to Meredith and Jillian describe some great examples of formative assessment in their classrooms, you may be thinking about how you may adapt their strategies to fit your content. I'd also now like you to reflect on this question: how are you sharing expectations with students? Since formative assessments give us feedback on how our instruction is helping students achieve our goals in the class, we should be sharing those goals and expectations for mastery with the students. Now, one of your goals was created with your department, and last week you came up with holistic scoring guides. If you haven't already, I challenge you to share these goals and these scoring guides with your students and invite them to discuss with you and their classmates what some of the knowledge and skills might be that are necessary for performing at that exceptional level. These specific knowledge and skills that you come up with together can be some of the things that you consider when developing your formative assessments. So think, how are you sharing, or how are you going to share your expectations with students, and then discuss ways that they'll meet those expectations and how that's going to help you develop your formative assessments. Another question that I'd like you to reflect on is, how are you sharing feedback with your students? Remember, formative assessment isn't just for us. It isn't to just inform our instruction. It's also to help the students and inform them of ways that they can improve in their achievement of our learning goals. So just take a moment and think about, what are some of the ways that you share feedback with students? As we wrap it up, I invite you to look at this quote about assessment, and I want you to reflect on how you use assessment in your classroom. Do you use it just for giving students grades, or do you use it to guide your instruction and really reflect on student learning? While it certainly may be appropriate to consider student behaviors when we are looking at a student grade, we shouldn't just use assessment as a means of marking down ABC or different percentage on a piece of paper. We need to really be focusing on what the students are learning and how they're using that knowledge, and how all of that can help us help our students get better.
But yeah, I guess when it comes to formative assessment, like even through notes, my big thing is I always ask the kids to give me the answer first. It's almost like that Socratic method of like, yeah, I know you've got it in there. And I think that is one of the benefits of teaching religion, because they do have that prior knowledge. Like, I know you've got it in there, let's just try to piece it together. So just asking them a lot of questions, letting them do more talk than you do.
Really, do you have any final thoughts to share about formative assessment?
I would say, I think everyone does use it, even if you don't realize you do. Even just having them answer as you go along, and if they can't answer, you stop for a second and either reteach or say you'll go over it tomorrow. But doing it's important, not just testing with no checking if we need to go over stuff.